Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to another episode of Ethan Explains. That's what I'm going to be calling this show tentatively. So let's start with the topic of today. So, oopsies. Hey, it's live. Nothing you can do. So, the topic of today is my personal philosophy, which is going to be foundational to everything else I talk about in this show. So, my personal philosophy I like to call it liberation humanism. Okay? You might be like, what is that? What is liberation humanism? Well, allow me to explain. So, let's talk about what is important. All right? So, in the world, in life, I think that the most important thing, most fundamental, foundational, crucial thing in the world is the sanctity of life. I know that's crazy to hear me say that. And the divinity of humanity. All right? Not just being, monkeys or beings that evolved from monkeys and then went on to have sentience and language, etc. No, more on the lines of, I think there is some sort of divine plan or unfolding, a divine unfolding where humanity is integral to that unfolding. And I think that we are, by nature, that, as we live in the universe, we are also living in the cosmos, which I think essentially ultimately means that we are living within God, right? God is part of us. God is everything, right? So if God is within all of us, I think that everybody has a spark of divinity in them, at least some. And so that's important to know for later. But let's stay on track here. So what that really means, my place in the cosmos, relative to the time I'm in, I do believe that, again, humanity is the most instrumental tool of the unfolding of the universe at this time. And it's through humanity that God is unfolding. Right? Sort of what you can call a project theology, that humanity and God work together to unravel or unfold the universe. This is against a lot of theology of a lot of major religious traditions, but I do not care. This is how I look at it. If everything was already laid out and perfect, why would we even need to exist, right? But our existence, our destiny, our story, our narrative serves a purpose. That narrative serves a purpose, and that narrative is to, again, bring God into fruition, to help God come out of, or be more revealed. And it's through like a struggle, right? Even the biblical themes of like arguing with God or struggling with God or the struggle. I think there is definitely a struggle with our existence, and we're supposed to struggle. I think that's the point. I think we're supposed to struggle. I think we're supposed to, over time, develop the language and the ideas around what God is and our relationship with God and what we're supposed to be doing in the name of God or for God or with God. So that's what I think. I think humanity is the key puzzle piece, right? And it may not have always been humanity before. It could have just been life generally. Life, right? The existence of life in the universe. Phenomenal. Life could have its narrative or its mission to work with God to eventually, ultimately create humans or humanity. And now if humanity is just another stepping stone on the path to creating an artificial intelligence of some kind, a super intelligence, or God himself will be revealed or created or, more transparently among us in time, maybe. I think AI could help with that. Many things do, not to say that it's totally perfect and okay and that we don't need to regulate it, but I'm not a Luddite here to say that we should stop technology. Okay? Um, so humanity is the key instrumental part of the universe and of God, and us as humans, us as humanity work with God. Again, humanity has a divine role to play. We are each individually divine and have divinity within all of us. So I put humanity first. I think humanity is the instrumental thing that I must care about and I must advocate for and defend and champion and do what I must do. Speak truth in on the front of advancing and progressing humanity. You know, and in history, certain principles and concepts and ideas and laws have proven what is better for humanity, what is better for the most amount of humans at the most amount of time, the most amount of space. And over time, through different philosophical eras, most notably the Enlightenment era, the idea of humanism sprung up. Okay, as like an ideal, as like a philosophical ideology, and this is the idea that you put humans first, humanity, and the integrity of preserving human life and human dignity and human liberty. These are things that are ultimate, right? These are the principles of God working through humanity, right? It's not so much bringing humanity about, but it's bringing humanity, which then can decipher, understand, and put language to goodness or grace, and then apply that grace to ourselves. Ensure that dignity and that liberty is seen by as many humans as possible, right? So it is the advancement, the progression, the uplifting, the development of humanity where I have found myself closest to God. It is in the service of me as a human to other humans, right? It is in service. That is the closest I have found to seeing and reaching and feeling God. Okay? So it is through humanity. Now, there's many different perspectives about how one can best serve humanity. In some cases, humanism might not be your answer, right? Some people are religious and think that like an organized religion is the answer to how humanity can be saved, or they don't even prioritize humanity, and that's just again what I consider a not fully realized or developed ideology or philosophy. So again, you have humanity, you have the ideas of humanism, and then again you have different perspectives of even humanism, right? For a long time, when I was growing up, there was this idea, this school of philosophy called secular humanism. There's organizations, there's advocacy around it, there's books. This idea of secular humanism. This is essentially taking the idea of humanism and its importance, and then really strongly, heavily applying the concepts of like STEM, science, math, logic, reason, things like that, applying those to humanism, and basically saying it is theology itself, it is religion itself that is counter to a humanist, a realization of full true humanism in the world. Interesting thought. I think at certain points, and I think within certain cultures, and certain places on the earth, I think that is completely true. I think that religion and the use of religion as a tool to oppress humans and humanity is very, very pervasive and well known and recorded throughout history. However, I think that there are certain channels of religious thought and tradition and even theologies that capture a humanistic presence or principle. So it's not easy to just say, I want a secular humanism. There are people that are really, really deeply believe in their religion, or better yet, not so much, but they still do believe in religion or even God, right? Someone like myself who has maybe a more heterodox view of who and what God is, I still feel like I'm not secular. I'm spiritual, right? The spiritual versus secular dynamic. I don't know that there needs to be one. I get that it might be nice. It might represent a more developed level of human consciousness to be like, yeah, I'm just reasonably ethical. Okay, but not everybody's like that, and not all cultures like have those privileges to feel that way and think that way, especially um, under oppression, under exploitation. It's not so easy to just make rational, logical connections to ethics and morals and being good and doing good. Religion, right, and the church plays a huge, huge part in a lot of people's worldview. So I don't want to reject it, right? I want to be cautious of it, but I don't want to reject it outright. In fact, I think in a lot of ways, a lot of those principles that people have from things such as their religion or their church can be used to, again, incite humanism, incite a humanistic principle. All right? They're complementary. These things are complementary. A lot of religious traditions ought to be complementary of humanism. Humanism, really, I believe as a humanist, I believe that humanism should be embedded deeply, and should be like essentially the cornerstone of all religious traditions and institutions. So, I'm not going to reject religion. I'm not going to reject different theologies around the world. I accept them. I celebrate them. I appreciate them, and I want to even utilize them for means to an end, for my means to my ends, which again is human flourishing. Okay, and even more deeply stated, more than just flourishing, I want what I refer to as liberation. Okay? So, liberation is a little different than just humanism as a concept. Liberation, I can't really necessarily tell you where it derives from so much, but I can tell you where and how it's been used, and then sort of bring it back and put it in the context of humanism. So, liberation, kind of in the movements of like the early socialist movements and the early labor movements. I think the idea of, and even a bit like ancient, back in antiquity, ancient times, the idea of freedom and liberation from being enslaved, right? It's even biblical. There's a lot of themes of becoming free. And even in many different religious traditions, because in Judaism that might be the case, but also in Christianity you also have liberation from sin, right? Being free from oppression, and then as it developed through Marxism, same thing: free from oppression, free from exploitation. This is what being truly liberated looks like. This is you can use liberatory philosophies and ideas and political systems to again, try to bring like quote unquote liberation or generally emancipation to humans, to the people, right? Additionally, in South American Catholic tradition, there's this idea of liberation theology. So going back to how religion can be useful. There are ways to look at it. Liberation theology talks about a lot of really cool principles. Criticizing institutions, that's something that we don't do. In Catholics we don't normally do. But this theology tells them that they should. They also have the preferential option for the poor, which essentially means like we put the poor, we put the oppressed, we put the person who's harmed most above us, right? This is kind of like literally how Jesus framed it. So liberation, very cool concept. As I understand it and as I define it as being free completely as a human from oppression, exploitation, and alienation. Okay, that is true liberation, and that is what I hope, strive for, and think the world should strive for. We should all believe in and care about. So you take liberation, and then you put it in this context, and embed it in the context of this really classic, important, significant philosophical idea of humanism. And you combine the two and you have liberation humanism. It is not that, humans are going to be liberated through a secular scientific worldview and philosophy. No. It is that humans must be liberated. And whatever view that may need to take, it's okay. If you are a Catholic, but you believe in liberation, you can be a liberation humanist. Catholics can be liberation humanists. Muslims can be liberation humanists. Secular humanists can be liberation humanists. Atheists can be liberation humanists. Anyone can understand the divine principle of humanity as it plays its role in God's kingdom, but anyone can also understand liberation and the purpose of it, the point of it, the reasoning behind why liberation could be the ultimate goal and mission of a human. Us humans should be trying to liberate ourselves, each other. That is what we should be doing. And this idea of liberation for humanity must inform the way we view society, the way we view politics, the way we view economics, the way we view culture. Liberation is key. It's to me, it's like saying God, right? Just like any religion might center God, I center liberation. And again, if you put it in the humanist lens, again, I do feel with the humanist lens, that is what my feeling about my deepest belief system is: liberation humanism. Okay, I'll stop it there. Review. Obviously, I talked very quiet, so we'll have to play it loud. But and I'll probably even redo this with a better explanation, more clearly laid out. But it was a good attempt.